and welcome back to another episode of Outcomes by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Kristin Baier, and with me today we have a very special guest, Dr. Clive Meanwell, who is chairman and partner at Population Health Partners. Dr. Meanwell, thank you so much for joining us here today. Do you want to give our audience a little bit of your background and what led you to Population Health Partners?
Yeah, sure. Good to be here, Kristen. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm a physician. I studied epidemiology statistics, did a fair bit of molecular biology in the early days of cancer virology. But then I really moved into drug development. I moved out of an academic setting, joined the Roche Group, and got roles in an Amgen partnership with Syntex when we bought them and with Genentech. And then I started running companies. The first one was the medicines company, which sort of gave us our first serious look at population health more than 10 years ago with a drug called inclisiran. We sold that company to Novartis for about $10 billion, which was an early sign to all of us, pre-COVID, that population health might become an important thing in the future. But I've been doing this quite a while, and I think I've been looking at the same system from different angles, coming to the same conclusion every time that, health systems are fairly good at pulling people back from the brink of various illnesses, but we're consistently failing them to keep them away from it in the first place. So with that thesis, we decided to start an investment firm focused on populations. And of course, the issues are different to rare disease, inflammation, the various subtypes of cancer. And those issues are scale, efficiency, prevention, lowering of disutility, and the economics are not so much micro, number needed to treat and QALYs and DALYs, but they're more macro, which is, can you have an impact on GDP? So PHP is having a go at that. We're trying to answer that. We're building companies. We're operating them, holding them to measurable health outcomes. And we believe, based on two good examples, the medicines company and Metsera, that this is a hugely attractive source of alpha, excessive, returns over competition, but also, of course, a great way, most importantly, to generate Healthspan.
Yeah, I can really appreciate that, being drawn to mission-driven work. And personally, that is what led me to Onsera and Population Health Partners. So I know a lot of us at Onsera and at the other companies are very excited to be part of this, and not just within the U.S. healthcare system, but really on a global scale. So very excited to see transformations going on in the healthcare space. And Dr. Meanwell, with all of your experience, I'm sure you have noticed some gaps in the traditional healthcare system. What are some of the biggest gaps that you have seen to date?
Well, what we're trying to invest in and fill gaps for are really three things. Since this time yesterday morning, about 57,000 people died prematurely of cardiovascular disease, for example. That's equivalent to 288 large airplanes going down with no survivors every single day, including holidays, one every 3 minutes, actually. And that's just cardiovascular premature deaths alone. If you add obesity, diabetes, mental health, musculoskeletal disease, other things, the top 10 modifiable health drivers cost the global economy over $7 trillion a year, and they wipe nearly 14% off GDP. So, we know what causes these conditions. We actually know how to prevent most of them, but we're simply not doing it. Rather, we're waiting for the consequences of disease to manifest later in life, and then we're pouring treatment onto it, which is fantastic, and long may that continue. But we have a very strong belief that investing in things that prevent them in the first place at an earlier time in life can generate a lot more GDP and can generate alpha for investors and can generate Healthspan, which we'll come on to. I think something's changed as well in the last few years, particularly the last couple of years, is that consumers are awakening to this, and they no longer are willing to, and neither do they have to wait to make good prevention choices. 40 million people a day are already using AI to answer pretty specific health questions. I mean, that number doubled in a single year. And I think general large language models and healthcare specific ones, agentic AI that doesn't just answer questions but acts on them, they're now widely available and rapidly being adopted. So for the first time, genuinely personalized, and I would say expert level health intelligence is kind of available to anyone who has a phone. And before the health system that I grew up in, there's huge asymmetry of knowledge and information. In fact, we kind of had a monopoly on all that knowledge and information. And now we no longer do. The Pandora's box is open. And so, how are we going to work with consumers and various other institutions to make the choices people are making wise ones? That's what we want to invest in. It's a science opportunity. It's a system opportunity. It's a business model opportunity. And the societal opportunity for governments, institutions, and enterprises at scale um, are enormous. And that's what we're excited by. And that's the gap we're trying to fill.
You made so many good points there that I want to dig into. And I think what you were alluding to a little bit earlier is that our current healthcare system is really sick care. There's not much focus on prevention or health span at all, for multiple reasons, starting with primary care physicians as well. There's just not enough time. But now with AI and a lot of direct to consumer companies, patients are really taking control of their own, I'll say, healthcare to some degree, and improving access. But I think there's still the guidance piece that is needed in most cases, and they can get great information out there, but who's overseeing all that care, and who can really dive into the details and specifics? And I think that's really where Population Health Partners is stepping in, and on Sarah's specifically. And,
Yeah.
we talk so much about longevity, and that's become kind of a trendy word in lifespan, but that isn't health span. Would you want to explain to our audience what you define as health span?
Yes, it's a simple idea. It's the number of years lived in good health versus years simply alive. Obviously, the gap between those two numbers is the problem we're trying to solve for. Um, there is a lot of activity and noise around the topic of longevity, and so far at least, people have missed the point that we've been living longer every decade since 1848 records were started. And it's a combination of things: social, financial, educational, health, uh, city systems. And that will continue. Our longevity improvements will continue. Um, the problem is in the US, the gap between longevity and health span, healthy years, is now 12.4 years. Globally, it's 9.6 years. So the US is doing worse than most. Um, And if you look at the most recent data across 183 countries from WHO and JAMA, that's hardly a rounding error. This is over a decade, about a decade of your life being spent managing decline in health, declining in social engagement, declining in economic productivity for you and your family and your friends. So it's really big. So health span is the number of good years lived in a lifespan.
Thank you for that. And 12 years is a huge gap with a lot of financial implications. And even leading up to that, the cost of, y- I'll say, what we're spending on all the cardiometabolic diseases, with cardiovascular disease being the leading cause of death in the US, and type 2 diabetes. The healthcare claims that are being generated decades before the end of health span are gigantic. And then those 12 years in between health span and lifespan, you're spent in doctor's offices or trying to get to doctor's appointments. You're in chronic pain. It's also very expensive. What type of, I'll say, macro impact do you see for the US if we continue to improve health span?
Well, we do a lot of work with Andrew Scott, whose book, The Longevity Imperative, is definitely worth reading. Andrew's a macroeconomist, not a microeconomist, and he's not a health economist, actually. But Andrew has been building the bridge between um, health span and to some extent lifespan, but mainly health span and economic outcomes. So the value of a single additional year of healthy life expectancy on a global basis for the world is estimated to be about $38 trillion. These numbers are mind-boggling. Um, Addressing just half the current health span burden would unlock about $2 trillion a year in GDP. It's roughly a 4-to-1 return on every dollar we invest in effective health intervention. This isn't philanthropy or charity. This is the highest return investment category available in the modern, certainly healthcare world. And just to be clear, I'm not advocating we spend less on treatment. The 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 OECD countries spend 97.2% of their healthcare dollars on treatment and 2.5% on prevention. I don't want to reduce treatment spending. I hope it would become more and more efficient. But the issue is we have to add spending on um, on prevention. Now, here's the problem. The cookie jar is empty. We don't have any more money to spend on healthcare as a general matter. So where that money is going to come from, it's going to come from the consumer themselves, which is why their education involvement is so important because we can, as a medical system, we can say, well, the consumer, what do they know? We'll tell them what to do. But actually, we need their wallet because they're spending $2 to $6 trillion right now on being well in ways that perhaps some of it is bordering on snake oil or even snake oil. And so trying to merge the insights of a healthcare system with the demand of a consumer is a great challenge of our age. And I think we're going to have to come together on that problem. But the prize is very substantial indeed. And for the healthcare system, we're not trying to reduce the income of doctors. We're trying to increase the output of society. And that's something which is going to be uncomfortable in transition. It's really not comfortable already for people who are professionally involved in healthcare because, like, well, what's my role going to be in a preventative ecology? And that's not going to be an easy one.
No, and I will confirm that there is a lot of apprehension amongst healthcare providers right now, even with AI and how that is going to impact employment, just with a lot of uncertainty. But we can all agree upon that the U.S. healthcare model is broken, especially considering the financial implications with the gap between health span and lifespan. You would think this would be motivation for someone to try to fix within the system. Why do you think that health span is largely absent from routine care today?
Well, I think that it's very logical and probably the best unpacking of, if we're focusing on the US, probably the best unpacking of it was Vivian Lee's book, The Long Fix, which she published in 2020, I think, where in about 12 chapters, Vivian, systematically takes apart the challenges of running a great healthcare system like the US. And I think it all boils down to incentives. I do think this is, by the way, a global problem. So I'm not just going to pick on the US as a
Right.
model to fix. I think worldwide we have to fix this. In fact, there was a wonderful and deeply honest letter by 3 primary care physicians in my country, Britain, went to the British Medical Journal where the 3 docs said, "Hey, dear Mr. Editor, Um, we're not trained to do prevention. We're not paid to do prevention. And we're not particularly interested in doing prevention. We want to treat diseases. That's why we all went to medical school. So what's all the prevention stuff? And I think I have some real empathy with that, with the current people who are working in our healthcare systems doing an amazing job all the time under pressure with all sorts of difficulties and adversities to overcome to give great medical treatment to people who need it. And then on top of that, we say to them, oh, and by the way, although we're not going to pay for you for it, because you also prevent cardiovascular disease and can you manage obesity and can you do this and can you? I think we have to really rethink how we're supporting our healthcare professionals so they have access to data that is easy to understand, actionable, and links up to the realities of the payment models we have today. We're not going to change everything overnight, so we need tools that will add the great judgment that our healthcare professionals have, together with the kind of information and economic information that payers want and employers want and governments want, and connect those together, but let the healthcare professionals exercise judgment. Now, one thing I wouldn't accept is not using AI. The Microsoft healthcare group's rather impressive experiment using complex diagnostic cases and demonstrating that AI has now surpassed the diagnostic accuracy of even expert physicians. That is an interesting observation. What's more interesting is when you put them together, the confidence goes down, not up. So somehow, when physicians get together with AI, they don't add up, and we have to learn how to do that. Um, uh, Mostly, when physicians in that experiment were asked to manage AI, the diagnostic accuracy went down. So that's tricky, right? But I do think there are ways we can educate our healthcare professionals on how best to use AI. I mean, at the end of the day, all the knowledge that AI is feeding back to you came from the medical profession in the first place. So I think there'd be a way forward. And it's just a note of caution to remember that it's easy to say that AI gets it wrong from time to time. The challenge is that physicians get it wrong more often.
It is very true. And there's just such a wide range of, I'll say, emotions and opinions amongst physicians, even nurse practitioners, physician assistants, on how they see AI being utilized. But I agree with you. This is a tremendous opportunity, and it's not a matter if AI is going to be utilized. It's how are we best going to utilize it. And education for the entire healthcare team is going to be a big part of that. But my message to the healthcare providers is like we're in a pivotal position right now where we get to help shape how AI is going to be used in healthcare. And I think it's really an exciting opportunity for everyone at this stage.
What so far AI cannot do, which healthcare professionals not only can do but love to do, is to provide empathy and understanding and a human, literally touch, but also a human connection. At the moment, AI doesn't show much discernment. AI tends to reflect the inputs that come to it, whereas humans have a lot more than that to offer. And hopefully, one of the things it will do is empower healthcare professionals to use more of their superpowers for more time rather than worrying about the only the pragmatics and filling in the forms.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the very basic level, AI a great help for the administrative burden. So we can focus on providing empathetic care to patients. And we've had this discussion many times as we developed the On Sarah program. As fantastic as AI is, that human connection is critically important. And health coaches, I think, can play a really big role here as well in fostering that support and empathy for patients when they're part of a multidisciplinary care team. So we've identified there's a lot of barriers to improving health span, and I'd love to hear more about how you feel Population Health Partners, specifically with its portfolio companies, is helping to overcome some of these barriers so we can start focusing more on prevention and improving health span.
But we focus on areas where, to begin with, the science is solid. The need, I think, is to be able to invest in new tools, new systems, new technologies, which are not going to be proven to be unsafe or unable to do the job. 3, 5, 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, well, why did we do that when there was no scientific evidence that would suggest it would, in the long run, pay off for subjects, for patients? Um, that having been said, the other side of the coin, which is so fascinating now, is that engaging people in their health journey to improve their health span is a deeply personal and, quite frankly, subjective set of issues for many, many people. Karl Popper, the philosopher who defined the difference between what he called science and pseudoscience, explained to us in the early 1900s that science is falsifiable, meaning you can prove it's wrong. You can't ever prove science is right, by the way. You can only approximate truth. But pseudoscience is not falsifiable. If I said I would never eat flapjacks on a Wednesday because I'm a Sagittarius and they make me look fat in the mirror, you would probably laugh at me, but I might believe that very, very strongly. And if that motivated me to stop eating a lot of carbohydrate when I shouldn't be, it's really very helpful to me. And to a scientist, that might feel a bit weird and even a little bit sort of laughable. However, we have to understand that as scientists, we have to, as they say in Switzerland, put some water in our wine and not believe that everything we know or think we know is going to be the basis for every decision that consumers make. We have to meet consumers where they are, and we have to work with their belief systems as well as our own. After all, look, there are 9 million scientists, including doctors, nurses, uh, physiotherapists, dietary experts, and so on in the world. And there are 9 billion non-scientists. So those of us who enjoyed a scientific education need to learn how to connect better with people who live a normal life and don't actually think of science as their first basis of making decisions. A lot of this stuff is to do with family, it's to do with uh, beliefs, it's to do with what your grandmother told you, what you learned online, what your friends are saying. And we cannot reject that, because if we reject that, then we lose the thread, we lose the connection. On the other hand, we are obliged as scientifically motivated people to explain things in ways that are understandable, useful, not dumbed down. I think there's too much dumbing down on the internet. Sophisticated, because most people we're talking about are very, very, very smart and they fully know what they want, but there's some explanations needed. So somehow our companies have to marry science and pseudoscience, have to marry consumerism with classical scientific discipline and try and build a bridge between those two so that when families or individuals decide to take a certain course of action, they really believe they're doing it because they want to, because they understand it, and because they feel that it's going to actually benefit their health span in a meaningful way. They also are not prepared to wait 50 years to find out. It has to be accompanied by real sense of progress in the short term that they can experience and feel and see progress, which of course is why overweight and obesity is such a terrific place to begin, because people can see the results of their changes literally in the mirror. So as we move forward, we have to find ways of engaging people so that they feel good about the journey they're on, good about the improvements they're making, which again kind of requires a huge amount of empathy and understanding with the audience, not just a bunch of scientists telling you what to do. So that's something which I think we're trying to focus on a lot, and there's a lot of learning on that because you're bringing together uh, parts of the uh, societal ecosystem that typically haven't lived together that well.
Yes. And empathy, I think, is even more important, in my opinion, with obesity medicine because patients have experienced so much bias and shame, and quite frankly, it's deferred them from seeking help. And I think the most impactful medication of the time is without a doubt GLP-1 receptor agonist. And I know one of the PHP companies, Metsera, developed a GLP medication, and Onsera kind of naturally is the next step in that equation. Now it's about expanding access to these medications and pairing it with a comprehensive program that provides support and human connection and education and get people excited and motivated and introduce them to these very effective therapies that are going to reduce the risk of cardiometabolic disease, which is really why we're trying to treat weight in the first place, which is going to have just a huge impact on health span and the quality of life overall, not just the duration. And within the PHP ecosystem, what other companies do you feel like are really going to help with the larger mission of improving health span? I know we have Ansera, I mentioned Metsera, which is the pharmaceutical company that developed GLPs. What are the other disciplines
Yeah.
within medicine that you think are going to have a big impact?
Well, just to expand on your point on Metsera, it in fact has a portfolio of nutrient-stimulated hormones, of which GLP is the first. And the themes of that were scaling, accessibility, uh, cost, reducing side effects, and worrying about maintenance. All of the hot topics that I know that Onsera is dealing with every single day with your clients. And I think there's still much progress can be made in that area, and uh, PHP will continue to invest in trying to make this amazing new family of drugs, which of course have a panoply of effects, not just on uh, weight, but also on cardiovascular disease risk,
Mhm.
even cancer disease risk potentially um, along the way. So we'll continue with that. And I believe that our friends at Pfizer who acquired Medsa are doing a great job developing not one, but multiple new medicines that will clearly challenge incumbency in the space. Um, Beyond that, we have another company called Coursera. This is addressing an adjacency to the overweight and obesity marketplace, which is the direct problems of cardiovascular disease, the main drivers being blood pressure and your lipids, particularly your low density cholesterol. Um, and there we have a company which is developing a once a year shot, which can be given to modulate your blood pressure and substantially lower your LDL throughout your life. The aim being to start that annual shot probably in your early 30s, even if you don't have any signs of cardiovascular disease, because the data clearly show that cumulative exposure to blood pressure and to bad lipids is what will eventually build up the plaque in your arteries so that roughly in your early 60s, you're most likely to have a heart attack. But once a year a shot, probably $300 a year kind of price point, could really, really transform cardiovascular risk too. So alongside the MedSera story, we're working on that. Another great big area of population health is pain. So many people live with chronic or acute pain. It's debilitating. It causes enormous problems with functioning, including working. Is a huge impact on GDP. And obviously, we've relied heavily on opioids for many, many, many decades, even centuries. And I think that there's a new class of medicines called sodium channel blockers, which our company Niroda is developing, which show enormous promise both in acute and in chronic pain. So that's two, three examples of the sorts of things we're doing, all of which are trying to build back those 12 years of health span loss that we're trying to tackle as a society.
Dr. Meanwell, thank you again for coming on and joining Outcomes by Design. You give us a lot of good information to think about on many levels and really painted a great vision of where you see improvements that can be made in the healthcare system and how we get there. Are there any last thoughts you want to leave with our audience, or any personal items that you want to share that you're investing in right now that's on your radar that you're really looking forward to in the future?
Well, I really appreciated the opportunity to chat with you today, Kristen. Um, Obviously, we are in a position together to get ahead of this health span issue. It's at the interface of health science, data, new business models, and consumer markets. And I think, as often is the case in innovation, when things come together, um, that's where the real advances start to be taken. So we have to remain very open. We have to be great listeners to one another and very focused on the need to rebuild this health span gap so that people can not only enjoy a long life, but have none of their years interrupted by chronic or even acute episodes that are avoidable. It's with us now. We have the tools, and after all, 288 planes going down every day would not be an acceptable transportation system. So why ever would we accept that for our health system?
That is a great thought. And again, thank you for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation. And to our audience, thank you for listening. And we look forward to seeing you again soon on the next episode of Outcomes by Design.